Hey, Matt.
Hey Andrew, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you? How's things?
Yeah, very good, thanks.
The absolute epitome of the white room today. I feel like I'm in some sort of asylum.
It's
So yeah, this way I have a window, obviously giving me some nice light, but that way I don't have anything. So how's your week been?
yeah, very good, very good. Yeah, all good with you?
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I think seeing that the traffic is back to normal, I'd almost say worse than ever. So I think that's as much as that's
Yeah.
difficult to negotiate, it's a positive sign here locally. And a few more of my friends, colleagues, etc., have been travelling to kind of different parts of the country. So I think we're seeing that as well, which is
Yeah.
good. It's positive. It's a move in the right direction, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Return to normal life almost, right?
Yeah, exactly. Sense of
Yeah.
normality. Still, obviously, just with
Yes.
masks on, but I think we can all cope with that if business is progressing, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Hi to everyone who's joined. We've got a few more who are dropping in now as well. So glad you guys can make it. So what we'll do is we'll just give everyone a couple of minutes, and then what we'll do is we'll get started. But I think just before we do that, Andrew, maybe we can talk about what's caught our eye this week.
Yeah, we could do. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think we can jump on that. I think look, directly in line with essentially kind of it being busier. I think the big news from a work perspective was obviously Tim Cook, CEO over at Apple, talking about this return to office, right? So I guess the what is it, WFO, so work from home, and RTO, which is return to office, and it seems like there's people very much in either camp at the moment, right? There seems to be a lot more employers in the return to office camp, and a lot more employees from the work from office camp, work from home camp. So I think it was just interesting that he's basically lined out, essentially saying that, look, starting September, they're not going back to full return. They're going back to a 3-day week. Obviously, after over a year of working remotely. So he said, I thought it was quite poignant, this kind of sentence I just want to lift from his kind of speech, was video conference calling has narrowed the distance between us, but there's some things that can simply cannot replicate, right? And I'd go along with that, right? I think that obviously, as much as you are as close can be, when we actually see each other, there's a different type of interaction than kind of over a Zoom or Teams call, right? And we're very close. So if you're dealing with perhaps from the client perspective or someone that's not has that closeness, there's obviously additional distance to that. So on the back of that, what's happened is that kind of some of the employees have got together, and raised their concerns basically.
Apple employees.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
So Apple employees have kind of raised their concerns.
Yeah.
They've listed out kind of 5 different things that they want to address or be looked at. So they're requesting that they consider remote and location and flexible decisions for a team. So have a look at that. They're looking at a company-wide reoccurring kind of short survey to kind of give transparency. They're asking about employee churn. So has there been any churn associated to people coming back or people threatening to leave as a result of that? They also want to kind of a clear plan of what does it look like, offsite, remote, hybrid, what is that, as opposed to this kind of moving goalpost environment. And then also what I thought was very interesting is they're requesting insight into the environmental impact of returning to on-site. And how that could affect location flexibility. So I guess they're talking about potentially, I don't know, driving to the office, possibly, emissions and things like that. So I thought it was interesting how all of them were very direct to the individual, and the last one was environmental. So I mean, what do you think? Where's your kind of head at in this? This kind of work from home or remote piece.
Yeah. Look, I mean, first and foremost, this is something we're just going to see more and more of, right? And and this is stuff that's happening, I think, across every company, pretty much everywhere in the world right now. So obviously when it's Apple, it gets publicized more. But look, I think the reality is if if companies, I think our chain of thought very quickly on in COVID last year was that if everyone is comfortable working from wherever they want to work, as long as they feel productive, then we're good with it. I mean, the commute, we realized very quickly, how much time we were losing each day, traveling to work, traveling, traveling back, and then obviously between meetings and stuff like that. And so, I mean, flexible working is a way forward, I think, for everyone. I mean, even if Apple was saying 3 days a week, I'm sure there'll be some compromise on that anyway.
I mean, I think the thing is now that a year is a long time in anyone's life, and I think the thing is that a lot of people, have made that decision that they're never going to go back to the office, and that may be, a mental decision, or it may be an investment decision where they've moved away, they've kind of not close to the office anymore, anything like that, right?
Yeah. Well, look, do you remember early on? So we obviously ran a survey internally. Christ, must be 2 or 3 weeks after we were locked down for the first time, right? Assuming that everything was going to get back to normal relatively quickly. And the sentiment was very different to what it was a few months later. So, the question at that time was, where do you want to work from? Do you want to work from home? And I think we had like 80% of people come back and say, look, I want to work from the office. I miss the office. I want to work from the office. 3 months later, we announced to the whole company, hey, office is open, feel free to come in. And we had one person in, right? And so we realized, I mean, it is about, look, if you want to go in, the office is open. If you don't want to go in, actually, it's fine, as long as, and I think it depends on the type of business, but in our type of business, if you're not productive, you get found out very quickly.
That's right.
And so as long as people were productive, then so be it. I don't really care where you are, right? I think it's more about making sure you're comfortable and in a good environment. But I don't know.
I think it'd be interesting, like you said. I think Apple, the Googles of the world, they all get publicized, right? I think that a lot of other organizations are going through similar challenges, and we'll just see how this kind of plays out. And I also feel like that also has some cultural attention as well in this part of the world. I think there's more of a push or a drive to see the person working in front of you, so they can walk out the desk and see that, versus perhaps somewhere else where the very idea of remote work in this part of the world was almost laughable pre-COVID. So I think there's some interesting change ahead. What's caught your eye? Because that was the one that kind of first pops up in mind. What about you?
Yeah, it was one I saw a few days ago. So I was reading an article, and it was about people who die while holding basically digital wallets or sort of crypto wallets, and because the idea of the very kind of nature of it is that it's very secretive, very secure. People are dying with thousands and thousands of bitcoins under their ownership, and nobody then knows how to access it. And it was really interesting because again, first and foremost, a lot of, say, younger people are perhaps holding digital currency compared to maybe slightly older people, and so they're probably not expecting to suddenly be run over or whatever it is, right? And but there's been so many cases where people have been like, look, my husband's got all of our savings in crypto, how do I access it? And they're like, well, unless you have the passcodes or unless you have this, you can't really access it. And people, you're talking about millions if not billions of dollars of wealth that's just essentially been lost. And then I started looking into this a bit more, and apparently 20% of kind of bitcoins are lost, right, within sort of wallets.
20%,
where people are over 20%, right? And so when I started looking at it, how much is that? So that's 3.7 million Bitcoin, which is just kind of like lost or out there somewhere. So if we look at that in real money, that's $140 billion of essentially Bitcoins that are just lost,
never going to be able to get back,
inaccessible,
done,
never going to be able to get back. And that's it. So I thought that was quite interesting, and also just on the industries that obviously spin off on the back of people understanding this. So already on the back of this, and I hadn't even heard of this as a real thing, but it apparently is now. And there's two parts. So one, now you've got sort of crypto inheritance businesses that are setting up, and what they're doing is basically saying, we can manage your sort of, we can, essentially we can sort of execute your will if, if you store all of your digital assets with us or give us access or whatever that format is, which I think is quite interesting. But then you almost look at the disruptive part of this as well, which is actually, does that mean now your sort of will executors, which are maybe traditionally lawyers or whatever that is, are they open to disruption now? Because look, if people are going to have all different kinds of assets, then actually your traditional law firm probably can't handle this, right? So,
no.
What does this create? There's this brand new industry that's about to kind of pop up because, the reality is people are dying all the time. And now if what makes up their assets and their portfolios is kind of changing, then like with anything related to this space, there's an opportunity. So it's really interesting, I think, in terms of what will happen in this space. But it caught my eye, and it just got me thinking of what would be good to share.
Yeah, no, I mean, interesting. We were talking about NFTs last week, and how obviously the younger folk are going to see digital assets and the ownership of that. So you're only going to see that space grow. So again, I mean, just like the Bitcoin, if it's sat in a wallet somewhere, that NFT that, the Charlie one we spoke about last week, that guy, there's $850,000 worth that's just kind of in the ether, right?
Yeah, and I tell you what's interesting as well. They again, just reading report on this, you got people saying, well, actually now what I've done is I've basically written down all my passwords, and I've done all of that kind of stuff just in case something happens. My wife now knows what to do. I mean, it's no different to writing down your bank details and or your credit card number, right? I mean, this is kind of where we're in again, which almost defeats the objective. So there's definitely space here, for businesses that really kind of get this right. But again,
one of my good friends, he basically uses his contacts on his phone and has all of his passwords saved as people, which I think is pretty smart. So it's kind of like it's people, which is quite cool, and phone numbers and stuff, which I think is quite cool, because it's obviously backed up and everything, and it's not necessarily something you'd ordinarily, do that. Whereas obviously quite a lot of people have a folder called passwords.
True. There's another way of doing it. So I mean, we tell you anything else caught your eye before we move on, Andrew?
Yeah, I think it's we kind of joked about this last week with old Jeff Bezos. It's difficult to do a growth show and the amount of growth that guy, just kind of inflicts on all of us without a week goes by and huge announcement, kind of he made, I think 2 days ago, was that he's essentially going to be heading up into space, right, on his Blue Origin rocket. And I just two parts of this came to mind. One was, that's real that's real, that really putting your kind of money where your mouth is, as it were, as far as, trusting your brand and trusting your product, right? Going to be jumping on there and heading up to space. I don't think Elon's done that yet on Space X, but on Dragon. But the other part of me was like, this feels very much like a movie where, Jeff Bezos, richest man in the world, one of the most powerful people in the world, goes up to a rocket in space and kind of just doesn't come back. It felt like, Matthew McConaughey's going to play him in about 20 years' time or something.
It really does, right? I mean, when I kind of heard this, you're like, okay, this is. I mean, I think I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were saying, why would Bezos do this? Actually, it was yesterday. It was last night I was listening to it, and obviously this just got announced, right? And they were like, why would Bezos do this? And the other guy was like, well, it's completed life, right? I mean, it's like done. So what else is kind of left? When you're in that position where you can actually say, I've completed it, I'm done. I mean, why not? Anyway, I mean, let's see.
That's
interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty nuts. Yeah. Well, we'll have to see where it goes from, right?
Yeah. So cool. Let's get into the main topic today then.
Yeah. Do you want to have a refresher, because there are some people in the room that are new to this. We've also got some people that have watched the previous Disruptive series, but we basically this is our fourth week now on essentially there was an article that came out talking about the least trusted professions. So this was a piece of research that was done locally. We felt as though it resonated across, the kind of world globally, as far as some of those particular industries. We've covered, last week was real estate. Prior to that, we had banking. And then the very first one that we looked at was recruitment. And I think each one of us has kind of, touched or been involved in some of those industries. So I feel like out of all of them, this particular industry this week is probably the one that may have all of us have impacted or come across at some time. It's difficult to find someone that hasn't interacted with either two of these, and that was telemarketers and financial advisors. So I almost felt some of the audience skin crawl when I said financial advisors there, especially if you're in this part of the Middle East, as we've got some people there. So yeah, this is the kind of deep dive on that, and essentially we kind of taken a look at each one of these industries and kind of picked it apart. So I mean, what's from a trust perspective? I mean, if I talk about telemarketers or financial advisors, where does your head go straight away?
So okay, yeah, I mean, look, I think what's really interesting with this is I think when we're talking about telemarketers specifically, again, not much has changed, right? You get these phone calls, you don't know the numbers, and then someone literally gets onto that kind of sales pitch directly. I think the most dreaded words when I do pick up one of these is that one there. The most dreaded words that straight away I know exactly what this is when I get someone saying, "Hi, am I speaking to Mr. Amit?" And I know at that point this is someone who's going to try and sell me something, right? Because I'm on so many of these lists, and it's a constant barrage, right? It's there's sort of multiple phone calls that happen on a daily basis now, and so I think it's just kind of I think it's well worth us kind of looking into this. Do we think there's a role for telemarketers? And we do. I mean, so just for kind of full transparency, we invested in a telemarketing business 12 months ago, because there's room for it in the market. But what we want to talk about today more than anything else is strategically, what can these kind of companies do, right? What does this industry need to do to kind of rid themselves of that, that initial 2 seconds of a client interaction where suddenly this is not going to be a good call. How do we kind of flip that around? How do we kind of help these kinds of businesses? I feel as if we've done that with a company that we've been working with. There's definitely been a mindset shift. So I thought it would just be good to kind of go into that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think it's prime. It's definitely prime. So I guess then, I mean, look, I think first and foremost, I feel like current kind of problem with this is, everyone has a story, as you just mentioned there, right? And as you were speaking, even though it's not on queue, someone was calling from a number that's unknown, right? And I think obviously, we get a lot of that, and going back to, even when we're kids and stuff, you kind of know about it, cold calls to the house and things like that. So I feel like from a trustworthy perspective, this is an industry that has essentially been so untrustworthy that they've now put legislation in place that you can't just cold call, you can't call individuals apparently, but you still can. So I think that's a problem in itself when you're legislating against something that obviously is there and out in the world, right? I think that causes some issues from that point, but I almost feel as much as it's an annoyance. Over the last year, I felt as though that actually I don't mind answering the phone.
Okay.
I'm okay. I'm okay to kind of accept some calls. It feels. I've even spoken to some clients recently on a phone call, because for whatever reason our lives have turned into Zoom, So, or Teams or whatever. You know, and now you kind of you're constantly seeing each other, and so I wonder if you felt similar, or I mean, are you kind of more accepting and more open to receiving some of these calls? So as much as, you know, it's frustrating, are we out there engaging with them?
Yeah, I lost you for a second, but just so basically you're saying that you don't mind receiving calls so much now. Is that just was that because of COVID, or what was the reason for that?
Yeah. I was just saying there that the you know, it's quite unusual. I've kind of taken to calling people again. So there was a time, famously, I think, when Gary Vee said a couple of years ago, you know, you'll be WhatsApping someone, you'll message someone, they'll try and call you, you won't answer, and you'll write back, "Why are you trying to call me? I don't want to talk to you." Right. So it's almost like people just didn't want to talk at all. But I felt during COVID, for whatever reason, perhaps it's being remote, or you know, having a lack of connection, or just this, you know, constant kind of video barrage. Perhaps we just want to go a bit old school and kind of pick up the phone. Now, I don't know if that's, you know, just me or if it's other people.
Think, right? No, I think look, I think there's some validity in that. I think, look, the challenge is again. So let's go back. So much has changed in the last year, and I think this is one of those things potentially. So, you know, we're used to human touch, human interaction.
Yeah.
Suddenly we're blocked off from that. And so when the phone rings, you perhaps pick up the phone more. I mean, I'm in your camp for this, because I did do that. I did pick up a lot more calls. I genuinely went for a rule probably about 2 years ago, where I was like, right, I'm just not going to answer a local 04 number that's not from a mobile, because I just know that I'm going to be annoyed and I'm going to be wasting my time telling someone that I don't want to do business with. Because I was just getting so many, right? And it was from banks and credit card companies and financial advisors. And this was the problem, right? It was just like, literally, when you're on a list in some places, you can't physically get off that list, because when you do say, take me off your list, you know, they just hang up and move on to the next number. Nobody's taking you off a list. And so
it's an automated process anyway.
Yeah. So but last year, sitting at home, working from home, obviously started picking up the phone more and things like that. And then obviously we kind of invested in a business that does it. So I started picking up a lot more calls, I think, just from a market research perspective, in terms of, okay, well, what is it that these guys are doing that perhaps we can learn from? So, but this was no different, I guess, in some, you know, we've discussed on this show about the behavioral changes that have happened inside all of us, because we can't operate in the same way now, because the same way isn't how we function, right? And I think it goes back to when I said to you, right, Andrew, we need to book a flight. Was it a flight? It was a hotel. It was like, we need to book a hotel. Where are you going to go? And it had been a year since we'd booked a hotel. And I said to you, mate, you need to book a hotel. Where are you going to go? Because I went through the same process. And you said, oh, I'll go to Google. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I was like, because where would you have gone before? And you were like, I'd have just gone straight to booking.com, right? And this is that change, because we haven't done stuff. You know, we kind of behave slightly differently now, and you know, there's tons of opportunities in the back of that. And I think, I mean, look, picking up the phone more is definitely one. Because again, you know, and there's also people, look, we're lucky we've got families and stuff around us. There's a lot of people who are living on their own and haven't seen people for ages. We've still got people in our team who genuinely don't leave the house unless they are physically forced to leave the house to run out of food. You know, because they're still very kind of scared of what's going on around us, right? So for those people, you know, if they don't pick up the phone within 1 or 2 rings, I'd be surprised, because it's like, you know, this is human interaction, right?
Yeah. And I also think as well that potentially, you know, it's also about, you know, and we've obviously, I guess, we should have some element of separation. I mean, you know, telemarketers, you know, are ringing for sometimes different reasons. So they're ringing for kind of updates on information. They're ringing to clarify certain information they may have, looking to qualify certain information, versus financial advisors. It's very much a hardcore sale, you know, in that sense, when it comes to that. But in that mind, I mean, you know, these companies themselves, I mean, obviously we're exposed to it because, you know, it's part of it, but I mean, I think that the way that they're approaching us is different as well, right? I think that the way that I've had some of these calls through, and for whatever reason, they've obviously had to be a bit smarter or whatever. I think what we've looked at traditionally on all of the kind of untrusted industries that we spoke about previously, I guess one of the big differences between this is previously all of those untrusted industries are rewarded for through commission, right?
Success.
I think, yeah, exactly, success. And telemarketing and financial advice is a bit different, right? I mean, because telemarketers has effectively got a sale now, a salary. They have targets. Obviously, they may need to make a certain number of calls per day, but all of that is rotated through technology. But they essentially have a salary. They're not. There may be a slight commission piece associated to it, but other than that, and I think, I mean, how do you think that kind of plays into this differently?
Well, I think it makes a difference, because I think you've got targets that perhaps give you a bonus as opposed to get you paid. And I think there's, and I think that's the difference between, say, maybe certain real estate companies, for example, that just have commission only payments. So I think it does make a difference. I think this is certainly one which is still incentivized by success, but perhaps in a kind of lesser extent, and it might be different for every company. But ultimately, I think a lot of this comes down, like you said, it's an automated process. Everything's tracked, and you've got to make X hundred calls a day. Otherwise, you're not perhaps hitting those sorts of targets. But yeah, so I think that does have an impact.
Yeah. I mean, I think also the fact that it is like an automated process. I think sometimes we forget that, as you mentioned there, if it's like, hey, remove me from the list, they physically can't remove you from a list because it's just literally in a rotation. I mean, I think I told you that religiously now every morning at 10 past 10, I get a phone call from the UK, and I know it's a cold call. I know it's pure cold call. I know it's an investment opportunity somewhere in Indonesia or something like that. The script is exactly the same. As again, you said it starts off with, hey, Mr. Andrew. I've asked to be removed. I've sometimes answered to try and trick the system, but that still obviously is being rotated through. And I guess you can block numbers and stuff, but obviously that's there. So I mean, so we've obviously touched upon the fact that potentially during COVID, it has changed. People may be a bit more accepting to receiving some of those calls. I also think that we should realise at some point calls weren't happening. Because obviously businesses were effectively closed down, right? So you had huge call centers that effectively, just closed up shop. And I know that in some places in the US, I have a friend that works for kind of, cable company Rogers, and they gave people the technology to work from home. But I know here in the region locally, call centers were just dropped, and we saw that with banks and things where that outbound credit card sales and stuff had stopped. So I mean, as we said, they're going back, and everyone's kind of coming back into the fold. Where do we think there might be some opportunities for these guys?
Yes, I think we need to start looking at this, like I said, more strategically, in the sense that where is the role for call centers? And I think if we look at the funnel, okay, I think the funnel is really important, because typically, and again, it's dependent on each type of business, but I think call centers, telesales people, telemarketers, potentially, where they kind of operate, or where their space is top of funnel. Like, and I'd say in 90% of cases, yeah. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to identify some level of interest. Okay, so they've got a list, they're working through that list, and essentially what they're trying to do is just say, right, is this person actually interested in this product or service? And if they're not, we move on to the next person. The second someone is interested, that's when perhaps there's another interaction. So maybe it's a case of they say, right, we're going to connect you with a sales agent, and there should be some sort of handover process there. But I think that's the problem now, because again, if we look at human psychology in the sense of, okay, all of the data around us tells us that people want to empower themselves by reselling themselves, right? They want to search for, a product or a service online. They want to then create almost like a bit of a mental shortlist. At that point, they want to speak to somebody. That sort of old school telesales operation doesn't fit in that thought process, right? And so I think one of the mistakes that so many businesses make is they try to say, look, this is how we do things, this is how we've always done things, this is how it's successful, and so we continue to do that, and perhaps we refine it, we add some technology in there. But actually what they're not doing is saying, okay, well, where is modern mindset now? If I'm going to buy a product or a service, I'm going to become aware about something or educate myself on something, what is that process? Now, how do I kind of, pigeonhole, for want of a better term, what we do into that process? How do we facilitate that process, right? And I think when you look at that telemarketing and the telesales, there's research data that's out there, which is 10 or 15 years old, which tells us people don't like to be called, right? You've said there's legislation in place which is supposed to protect us from that. So why does it keep happening? And so I think when you look at it from a kind of funnel perspective, right now, it's where is that opportunity? And I think one of the things that we've tested, and we're fortunate in the sense of, we've got a partner that we do have a kind of loud voice with, that we can say to them, actually stop doing it here, but why don't you do it at this stage, right? Which is maybe the second or third stage down, and suddenly the conversations that their team were reporting on was very different, right?
Yeah.
And I think that experience changes. And just to go into, let's say, a little bit more detail, what we tested actually with Pipeline was that actually don't cold call someone. Let's try and educate them. If we know that they're in the market for a product or a service because we're running maybe some digital campaigns or some digital activity, why don't we wait until such point that we know that that person is actually invested in the process? Because all of that technology exists, right? With tracking tools and marketing automation and CRM and all of that kind of stuff. We know if someone's interested in the product or service or not. But if we get to a point where we can understand that actually they've already invested, a good period amount of time in educating themselves, what is it that we need to do at that point, right? Is it do we wait for them to contact and phone us, or can we kind of intercept that process by timing a call at that point? And that's what we kind of trialed, and it's something that we're constantly trying to refine. But I think it's been really interesting to see some of that data and some of those insights come through, right?
Yeah. So looking at this, just differently, right? That's what you're saying. So look at it if as in some of the other industries that feel as though they're almost bulletproof, right, in their operation, or if they're not bulletproof, they're perhaps not open to change because, hey, listen, we've been doing it like this for the last 25 years. This may be an opportunity to just almost slide it a bit and kind of change the narrative, right?
Yeah, and I think if you look at it, if you want to summarize it, should they be, they almost need to redefine what they are, because I almost feel as if you get the process right and you figure out for your business, this is the point when I need to be making these phone calls because now these calls are well received and I'm adding value. Okay, and I think it always comes down to how much value that person's adding by doing that thing. Then our kind of modern call centers now help centers, right?
Yeah.
Because again, they should be helping the process and perhaps not starting the process, if that makes sense. Because again, all of the data, all of the research tells us that nobody likes being called. So let's kind of eliminate ourselves away from that. But what we do know is at some point in that process, someone needs to speak to somebody, right? And so if we can be that kind of helping hand here, which is still automated, which is still driven by lists, but ultimately is driven by data now, right? And I now pick up the phone and say, hi, Mr. Thomas, I see that you've got an interest in this. I just want to check, have you got any questions, or, do you need me to kind of, point you in the right direction with any of this? Just anything, right? How can I help? I think that just turns into a completely different, completely different conversation. And at that point, you look at it, right? The second the first thing I said about this is I know within 3 or 4 seconds, right? Maybe even less, whether somebody's cold calling me because they want to try and sell me something. So the first thing that happens is I get my guard up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, try and remove that guard, and it's really difficult. Okay, because I already dislike this person for calling me and interrupting me. Right. The second reason I hate them is because now they're trying to sell me something I've shown no interest in and I've got no desire to have. Right. And so you try to overcome that, and it becomes difficult. And I think honestly, that's why we'll talk about that next week with financial advisors, but that's why they've got a bad rep, because it's, you know, most of the time it's an untimely phone call. Yeah. It's an untimely phone call where they're kind of, you know, trying to get something out of you and it doesn't work. So I feel, again, driven by demand and things like that is just, it makes total sense, I think.
Yeah, I think I think also we've obviously looked up at this point into outbound telesales. I think there could be an argument, as you mentioned there, you know, in line with that help center, for more of a focus on kind of inbound telesales. So when people do have a point of purchase, I mean, interestingly enough, just today I had the reverse piece where, to reset some of my banking activity, I did everything online, and they said, "Hey, listen, we now need you to go offline. You need to talk to someone, right, for verification and stuff." And I'm smoothless, completely frictionless. It was very smooth, you know. I was like, "Oh, really? Why have I got to call someone? Why can't you just send me a message or something like that?" But went through the process, and you know, at that time, that individual did turn into one of that help center, right? It was, "Hey, listen, I've noticed this on your account. Do you know about this? Do you know about that?" So not only were they well versed enough to hold a conversation for a problem I had, but they also were then, you know, transitioned very nicely into an advisory capacity, right? Because they've essentially got everything in front of them at that point. They know all about me. They know, you know, the structure of the account, everything there, and they can see potential gaps. I mean, I think that's an interesting piece as well, where it may be some of that transition, not so much outbound telesales, but kind of inbound and working with whatever their online capability is. And that may be the same for something like your you know, e-commerce space, right? Because the e-commerce space, their comfort level is still very much you know, new, let's say, as far as some people are uncomfortable, unless it's Amazon and stuff, but it may be a new brand. I know that when we've had kind of new business approach us, we said, "Listen, you've got to have a help center, you've got to have a contact center, you've got to allow someone to pick up the phone and speak to you." Because interestingly enough, and back to your point of help center, as much as we hate talking to people, when we've got a real problem, we really want to talk to someone. Right? So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the last thing you want to do is try and No, I completely agree with you. Yeah. No, and I think that's, you know, I think that's it. Look, there's two different parts here. I think one is customer support, and the other side of it is you know, sales support. And I think, you know, essentially it is that sales support role, I think, is critical. I mean, the first time we tested this, the kind of our approach to almost like a bit of a help center, was with a real estate client of ours. And again, it's another industry which was on that untrusted list, right? And and essentially the client's like, "Look, I want to have qualified leads." And we said, "Okay, well, we can do that, but you're going to have to redefine the process. We're going to have to relook at the process, because how you're doing it today just doesn't seem to have the impact you want, hence why you're talking to us." So that's the process where we changed it and said, "Look, let's make sure that where, you know, if somebody is interested in a property or development or whatever it is, we send that person all the information that would help them make a decision. We'll track those interactions because the technology allows us to do it. It's nothing underhand there. We'll score those interactions and touch points. And then only such time where we see that somebody is physically invested by scoring X, that then goes to the call center. The call center, then it's their job to then make sure that they do make that phone call. But I think the initial conversion rates, I think, were mind blowing. So it's about 67% of those phone calls were then leading to sales meetings, because the conversation was just designed to be help. Now, there's no call center in the world which will give you 67% conversion rates, but the point is you weren't phoning everyone, right? So you were only phoning the people who we felt were qualified enough to have the phone call. And if they weren't qualified to have a phone call, you just leave them alone, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's that kind of key difference. And like I said, but that was very much sales support. And the objective was, let me connect you with somebody who maybe knows a little bit more, but if you've got initial questions, I can help you out with those. Versus, the customer. And I think the customer support call center side of it is still valid. I mean, it does wind me up when I have to speak to the bank when I can't speak to someone, right? Yes. And I think that's very different to the bank phoning me up, trying to sell me something like a credit card, and it's the same bank, and you're like sitting there frustrated going, Christ, when I do want to speak to somebody, I can't, and now I don't want to speak to somebody, and you guys keep harassing me, and it's, it's kind of like that kind of frustration, right?
Yeah, it was interesting as far as the call center goes. I was a couple of years ago, I was kind of hosting a panel in Saudi Arabia with an STC were on, the guy who heads up all of the call centers for Saudi Telecom, and he was saying that as part of the digital transformation, they wanted to eliminate human contact, right? So it was kind of pure IVR and kind of all voice activated. But what they noticed was, as they were going through that process, they really started to neglect a certain sector of the community. So kind of anyone that was 50 plus didn't have the skill set to tweet or kind of just didn't have any kind of knowledge as far as interacting with an individual online, and they were kind of being pushed out, right? Even down to, he was saying at the time, even down to KPIs. So he said that there was a KPI, for example, that if a customer tweeted you, you had to respond within, let's say, 3 minutes. However, if that same customer was on hold, it was indefinite. There was no KPIs associated to individual hanging on the phone waiting to speak to someone, and they had to shift. They had to shift their approach because they realised that at that point it's almost impossible to make it completely peopleless, as it were, right? In that environment, right? As good as technology is, yeah.
Yeah. No, and again, that's that over reliance on technology and losing sight of actually what is it that your customers want, right? But again, I'd still say that's more customer service and customer care as opposed to, which should obviously be a completely different strategy than that initial kind of sales lead gen element. Which I think is you're not giving the people an opportunity to become a customer at the moment, unless they really will have to. Because of the way you're selling to them.
Yeah, I think you and I touched upon this earlier, but I wonder if as salespeople, as commercially active people, I wonder if our sales senses or our spidey senses are a bit more in tune with sales. So I wonder how often the layman kind of gets a call off a random number and immediately thinks they're being sold to. We think that because we experience it day in, day out, and we've got that kind of mentality and mindset. But I wonder how kind of normal folk react out there,
I completely missed all of that, mate. I don't know whether it's your connection or mine, but I just heard nothing for about the last 30 seconds.
Excellent, good stuff. Yeah, we're recording from our office today, so it's good. It's good that we've got some dodgy connections. Now, I was just saying that I think the thing is, I wonder if our spidey senses, our spidey sales senses, are a bit more in tone with, in line with these salespeople that are calling, right? I wonder how often normal person, when they say, "Hey, listen, am I speaking to Mr. Andrew?" Yeah, you're speaking to Mr. Andrew. How can I help? Versus, yes.
No, look, I totally, and I think we may look at something as a problem because of that spidey sense compared to someone else. And like I had it yesterday, and I was telling you about it. It was one of the telephone operators here, the big telecoms companies here, phoned me up, and I answered it because it came from their number. Spoke to them, and they the first question was obviously, "Hey, I'm speaking to Amit." Yes. Second question, actually the second part was, "I just want to run through your phone bill with you." And I was like, okay. I was like, why? He's like, because I just want to check if everything's okay. And I was like, okay, sounds dodgy. Check the phone again. Did I pick up, what number was it? Because he was like, "Can I take your name?" I was like, "Well, you've just called me. You just said, hi, am I speaking to Anna?" The second thing was about the phone bill. I want some information. I was like, I don't get it. I was like, look, if you want to run through my phone bill, I don't get why, because obviously I think you guys have got systems for that. But if you do, that's cool. But just don't ask me any questions, right? Because I was like a little bit nervous as well. So went through it. He's like, okay, you're on this package and your bill comes to this much every month. I was like, okay, are you interested in looking at another package? And I was like, okay. So it was actually pretty smart, because essentially I'd have normally hung up by then. But the fact is, he kind of started to look at my data. And again, I thought it was a smart way of doing it. But again, I knew he was trying to sell to me the second that happened, but appreciated the fact that, okay, there was a slightly different approach. You know, albeit unsuccessful, but still kind of, but again, I don't think others would have reacted in the same way. But I just, you know, I don't know. I guess we just pick up on stuff, is I guess what you were saying, right?
Yeah. I think it's you know, you kind of, your spidey senses go up there, but yeah, I think that's it. Good, that's good. I've got a pretty good hack of the week that I want to share with everyone.
Cool.
So this week is similar to last week, actually, but in line with it seems to be a lot more people kind of doing podcasts, right? And more importantly, doing remote kind of podcasts. So this is a pretty cool one that's come up, and this is called Squadcast. So SQUADCAST.fm, Squadcast.fm. And what they're trying to do with this is they're basically trying to make the quality, which possibly we've suffered today, improve the quality of the podcast, basically. So, you know, we're remote, where we're kind of recording from our desktop devices or AirPods or whatever. So this is another one of those that kind of comes into a free 7-day trial. As far as kind of being able to do that. And the basic one allows you kind of 5 hours of recording a month, which is more than enough for most people's kind of initial podcasting activity for only $20 a month. So I thought this was pretty cool.
Okay.
Share with the kind of audience out there to have a look, see if there's a couple there now over the last couple of weeks that have kind of gone through that. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of this sort of technology that's popping up now. But yeah, I mean, look, I think for people who are still kind of hesitating and sort of creating content, I think this kind of tool really makes a difference. Yeah, I quite like it.
Yeah. I mean, it's look, and I think if anyone is hesitating to jump on a podcast, is a nice kind of easy slide into creating content. Basically, you know, there are really people out there doing 10-20 minute podcasts, just kind of commute to work stuff. You know, I think one of the best bit of advice I got from a guy talking to me 5 years ago, who was podcasting at the time, the conference, he said, you just need to, you know, stay in your lane. And that was effectively like, what do you like talking about? What do you enjoy? You know, and go on about that. I mean, he kind of started a podcast up with his friends, specifically around wine and cheese, but specifically wine and cheese, you know, in California and what was available locally and even in his own town. So very super specific, but we've got a wider audience, obviously, from people being interested in that. So I think, yeah, if you haven't fired that up, that's it. So next week we have our last industry, right? Financial advisors. That's the last one. Apparently 5th on the list of least trusted. I'm not sure if I'd agree with that, if they should be perhaps a bit higher. But I guess obviously that's up for debate next week, right? Looks like Amit may have frozen again, or I've frozen. I'm not 100% sure. I'll give it a minute and then see if he pops back up. And if he doesn't, I think we can cast off. There, Amit, you're back.
Yeah, I'm there. Yeah, I'm back. Okay, cool. Well, let's end it there, Andrew. I think.
Yep. So we'll catch you next week, everyone. Thanks for hanging around. Thanks for joining us again, and we'll see you next week. Thanks. Bye.
All right. Cheers. Bye-bye.